My own daughter told me I was an embarrassment to her future and needed to stay away from her wedding. I'm Leonard Mitchell, and for 45 years, I've been building something in the shadows, while everyone assumed I was just another retired nobody collecting Social Security. She gave me an ultimatum: accept that her boyfriend's family comes first, or don't bother showing up to any family events ever again. What she didn't know was that the $4 million trust fund she'd been counting on since she was 16.
Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from. And if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you.
The one she'd already spent in her mind 1,000 times wasn't hers anymore. By the time she realized what happened, the money was already gone to people who actually needed it. I never argued with her. I never raised my voice. I just made 4 phone calls and signed 3 documents. If you're watching this, please subscribe and let me know where you're watching from, because this story begins 4.5 decades ago when I made a promise to myself about the difference between leaving someone wealth and teaching them values. That promise would cost my daughter everything she thought she had coming. Most people who see me understand exactly what my daughter Jessica sees: a 72-year-old man who drives a 2006 Honda Civic with a dent in the passenger door and 210,000 miles on the odometer. Someone who clips coupons at the grocery store, buys his jackets at Goodwill, and brings store-brand cookies to family gatherings where everyone else shows up with fancy bakery boxes. Jessica Mitchell Ashford, 32 years old, marketing executive at a tech startup, engaged to Connor Ashford, whose family owns a chain of luxury car dealerships across the Midwest, and absolutely certain that her grandfather is a relic from a bygone era who doesn't understand how the modern world works. "Grandpa, you dress like you're still living in 1987, she told me at Christmas dinner last year. "Connor's parents are going to think our family has no class." Connor Ashford, third-generation automotive dynasty, drives a different luxury vehicle every month, wears suits that cost more than I spend on clothes in 5 years, and has never once asked me about my life before he entered the picture. His parents, Douglas and Maureen Ashford, own 17 dealerships, generating roughly $300 million in annual revenue, live in a gated community with a country club, and have made it abundantly clear that they consider my side of the family to be, as Maureen once said within my earshot, charmingly humble. The first warning sign came 8 months ago when Jessica started talking about my finances in family conversations. "Grandpa's on a fixed income," she'd explained to Connor's family, as if I weren't sitting right there. "We need to be understanding about his limitations." The second sign was when she stopped inviting me to events where Connor's extended family would be present. She claimed it was about keeping things simple, but I overheard her tell her mother that having me around created an awkward dynamic because I didn't fit the aesthetic they were going for. The third sign, the one that told me everything I needed to know, happened 5 months ago at Jessica's birthday brunch. Connor's parents hosted it at their country club, and I showed up in my usual attire: khaki pants from JCPenney and a polo shirt I'd owned for probably 15 years. I brought a card with a check for $100, same as I'd done every year since Jessica was born. Maureen Ashford took one look at me and whispered something to Douglas, and both of them smiled in that way wealthy people do when they're being charitable about tolerating poor relatives. Jessica pulled me aside before dessert. "Grandpa, we need to talk about expectations." "What kind of expectations?" "For the wedding. Connor and I have been discussing the guest list, and we think it might be better if you attended the ceremony but skipped the reception." "Why would I skip the reception?" She looked uncomfortable. "Because Connor's family is inviting a lot of important business contacts, and we need to maintain a certain image. The reception is going to be very formal, very upscale, and I just think you'd be more comfortable at a smaller family dinner the next day." A certain image. Those words hung in the air between us like a guilty verdict. "You're asking me to skip my own granddaughter's wedding reception because I don't meet your image standards?" "Grandpa, please don't make this harder than it is. You know how Connor's family is. They're very particular about appearances and social status. I need you to understand that this is important for my future, for our future." Your future with Connor's family or your future with your actual family? Both, she said, but her eyes told me which one mattered more. I didn't argue. I just nodded and said I'd think about it. That night, Jessica posted on social media about wedding planning stress and the challenges of blending families from different backgrounds. The comments from her friends were telling. One person wrote, "Girl, you can't let old-school family members hold back your special day." Another said, "Sometimes you have to set boundaries with relatives who don't understand your lifestyle." Jessica liked both comments. What Jessica doesn't know is that I've been watching her social media for years, seeing how she presents her life to the world. Seeing her talk about her career success, her luxury apartment that I later learned Connor pays for, her designer handbags and exotic vacations. In her version of reality, she's a self-made professional who earned everything through hard work and talent. I'm just the elderly grandfather who existed somewhere in the background, a reminder of humble origins she'd rather not emphasize. But the breaking point, the moment that changed everything, wasn't the wedding reception dismissal, or the social media posts, or even the gradual erasure of me from her public life. It was what happened 6 weeks ago, when Jessica and Connor came to visit me at my small 2-bedroom house in a modest neighborhood 30 miles outside the city. They showed up unannounced, which should have been my first clue that something was wrong. "Grandpa, we need to discuss your living situation," Jessica started before she'd even sat down. "Connor and I have been talking, and we're concerned about you staying in this house alone at your age." Connor jumped in smoothly, his dealership sales training evident. "Mr. Mitchell, Leonard, we've been looking at some excellent assisted living facilities in the area. Beautiful places, really top-notch, with activities and healthcare services and social opportunities." Jessica nodded enthusiastically. "We found one that's absolutely perfect. It's clean, safe, the staff is wonderful, and you wouldn't have to worry about maintaining this old house anymore." I looked around my home, the place I'd lived in for 30 years, where I'd raised Jessica's mother after my wife passed, where Jessica herself had spent countless weekends as a child. "You want me to sell my house and move into assisted living?" Jessica's expression was patient, the way you'd talk to a confused child. "Grandpa, you're 72 years old. This house is too much for you to handle. The yard work alone must be exhausting. And frankly, the neighborhood isn't what it used to be." What Jessica didn't mention, but what I'd later discover, was that Connor's parents had suggested this move. They'd decided that having a prospective family member living in what Maureen called a declining area reflected poorly on their social standing. The assisted living facility they'd chosen was nice enough, but it was also conveniently located an hour away from the city, far enough that unexpected visits would be unlikely. "What happens to my house if I move?" I asked. Connor had an answer ready. "We'd help you sell it, of course. The real estate market is strong right now. You could probably clear $200,000 after expenses, which would give you a nice cushion for living expenses, plus cover several years at the facility we're recommending." Jessica added, "And the best part is, you wouldn't have to worry about anything. We'd handle all the logistics, all the paperwork, all the stress. You could just focus on enjoying your retirement." Enjoying my retirement in a facility an hour away with $200,000 that would cover several years, after which I'd presumably be dependent on Jessica and Connor's generosity? And what about after the money runs out? Jessica and Connor exchanged a glance. "Well, obviously we'd help support you. We're family." Connor smiled. "Mr. Mitchell, the Ashford family takes care of their own. Once you're officially part of our family after the wedding, you'll never have to worry about financial security again." Part of their family, under their control, dependent on their generosity. I looked at my granddaughter and saw a stranger wearing a familiar face. "Jessica, when did you stop thinking of me as someone who could take care of himself?" She sighed. "Grandpa, I'm trying to take care of you. You're not getting any younger, and this house, your lifestyle, it's all just becoming too much. Let us help you transition into something more appropriate for your stage of life." More appropriate. The same phrase her father had used about my clothes at her birthday brunch. I stood up slowly, feeling every one of my 72 years in my bones, and walked to my small home office. Jessica and Connor waited in my living room, probably thinking I was getting documents or financial records. Instead, I came back with a single folder, one that I'd been keeping updated for situations exactly like this. I opened the folder and showed them the first document. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. Jessica leaned forward to read it, her face initially curious, then confused, then alarmed. Connor looked over her shoulder, his salesman's smile fading into something harder to read. The document was a property assessment from the county assessor's office, dated 3 months ago. It showed my modest 2-bedroom house valued at $215,000, exactly in line with what Connor had estimated. But it also showed something else. It showed that the property was owned not by Leonard Mitchell personally, but by a company called Heartland Community Trust. "What is this?" Jessica asked, her voice uncertain. "That's my house. Or rather, that's the entity that owns my house. I've never heard of Heartland Community Trust." Most people haven't. It's a private charitable foundation I established in 1979. I pulled out another document, this one showing the foundation's complete property holdings. 43 residential properties across 6 states, all purchased over the past 45 years, all currently operated as affordable housing for low-income families, veterans, and seniors. Current portfolio value, approximately $8.3 million. Connor's face went pale. "You own $8 million in real estate?" "I don't own it. The foundation owns it. I'm just the founder and director. But yes, the foundation controls $8.3 million in property assets, plus another $4.7 million in investment accounts and treasury bonds." Jessica stared at the documents like they were written in a foreign language. "Grandpa, this doesn't make any sense. You clip coupons. You drive a car that's almost 20 years old. You buy clothes at Goodwill." "I do all those things because the money I don't spend on myself goes into the foundation. Every dollar I save on unnecessary expenses is a dollar that helps someone who actually needs it." Connor found his voice. "Mr. Mitchell, are you telling us you're worth over $13 million? "The foundation is worth over $13 million. Personally, I live on my Social Security and a small pension from my years working as an industrial engineer. About $3,400 a month, which is plenty for someone with modest needs." Jessica's hands were shaking as she held the documents. "An industrial engineer? You never told me you were an engineer." "You never asked. You assumed I was just some blue-collar worker who got lucky with a union pension." Connor was reading through the property list. "These addresses, some of them are in pretty rough neighborhoods." "That's correct. Affordable housing tends to be in areas where real estate is less expensive. That's how we can help the most people with our resources." Jessica looked up at me with something between shock and anger in her eyes. "How long have you been doing this?" "Since 1979. I bought my first property, a duplex in Cleveland, with money I'd saved from my engineering work. I fixed it up myself, rented one unit at market rate, and let a veteran and his family live in the other unit for whatever they could afford. That was the beginning." Connor was doing math on his phone. "If you've been doing this since 1979, that's 45 years of building this portfolio. 45 years of living below my means so others could live above theirs." I pulled out more documents, these ones showing the foundation's annual reports. Last year, we provided housing assistance to 127 families. Total rent subsidies and housing support, approximately $890,000. We also provided emergency housing grants to 43 individuals facing eviction or homelessness. Jessica was reading an annual report from 5 years ago. "Grandpa, this report lists you as working 60 hours a week managing these properties. Someone has to do maintenance, handle tenant issues, coordinate repairs, manage the books. I have a small staff, 2 property managers and an accountant, but most of the hands-on work I do myself. That's why you're always busy. That's why you never have time to travel with us or attend events. Not because I can't afford to, but because I have responsibilities to people who depend on me." Connor set down his phone. Mr. Mitchell, with all due respect, this seems like an inefficient way to run a charity. You could hire professional management, pay yourself a reasonable salary, enjoy your retirement. I could, but then I'd be someone who ran a charity, not someone who lived by the principles that made me start it in the first place. The moment I start paying myself 6 figures to manage other people's housing is the moment I become part of the problem instead of part of the solution. Jessica's voice got sharp. So what? You've been pretending to be poor this whole time? Testing me? Judging me? I haven't been pretending anything. I live exactly as I need to live, and I never lied to you about my circumstances. You made assumptions based on what you saw and never bothered to ask deeper questions. Connor stood up, his dealership charm completely gone. This is unbelievable. Jessica told me you'd need our financial support in your old age. She said you were barely getting by. Did she ask me if I was barely getting by, or did she tell you I was barely getting by? Connor looked at Jessica, who wouldn't meet her eyes. The difference matters, I continued. One is concern based on communication. The other is assumption based on appearance. Jessica exploded. So this is my fault for caring about my grandfather, for trying to help? You weren't trying to help me, Jessica. You were trying to manage me. There's a difference. Connor tried to regain control of the conversation. Look, Mr. Mitchell, Leonard, I think we all got off on the wrong foot here. Obviously, you're much more financially sophisticated than we realized. That's actually great news. It means you don't need to worry about assisted living costs. You can afford whatever level of care you want. I don't need assisted living at all. I'm in excellent health, I have meaningful work, and I have a home I love in a community where I'm needed. But Jessica said this neighborhood isn't safe anymore. I've lived here 30 years and never had a problem. What changed is that this neighborhood isn't prestigious anymore. The families here aren't wealthy. Some of them struggle. Some of them are the same families my foundation helps in other properties. That makes some people uncomfortable, but it doesn't make it unsafe. Jessica's face was red. So you're saying I'm a snob? I'm saying you've started measuring people by different standards than the ones I raised your mother with. Connor pulled out his phone. I need to call my parents. They need to know about this. Know about what? That your future grandfather-in-law isn't the financial burden you told them he was? Connor's jaw tightened. My parents have been making arrangements, setting aside funds to help support you after the wedding. They've been very generous about accepting you into our family despite the financial disparity. Despite the financial disparity. I let that phrase hang in the air. Connor, what exactly do your parents think the financial disparity is? He looked uncomfortable. They understand that Jessica comes from a more modest background, that her family doesn't have the same level of resources as ours. And you encourage that understanding. Jessica jumped in. Grandpa, Connor's family has been incredibly welcoming. They've included me in everything, treated me like I already belong. They've been very understanding about our family situation. Our family situation being that you have a poor grandfather who embarrasses you at formal events. She started crying. That's not fair. You don't understand the pressure I'm under. Connor's family expects certain things. They have standards. They have a reputation to maintain. I understand perfectly. You've chosen their standards over your own family, over your own grandfather who changed your diapers and taught you to ride a bike and paid for your college education? That stopped her cold. What? Your college education, 4 years at Northwestern, $240,000 in tuition, room, and board. You thought that came from your mother's salary as a high school teacher? Jessica's mouth opened and closed. Mom said she had been saving. Your mother made $52,000 a year. After taxes and living expenses, how much do you think she could save? I paid for your education through the foundation's scholarship program. You were one of 47 students we helped that year. Connor was staring at me like I'd grown a second head. You paid for her entire college education?
through a charitable foundation scholarship that she had to apply for like everyone else. She wrote essays, submitted transcripts, interviewed with the selection committee. She earned it. But yes, I made sure the foundation had enough funding that year to accept all qualified applicants, including my granddaughter. Jessica was sobbing now. Why didn't you tell me? Because I wanted you to believe you earned it on merit, not family connections. And you did earn it. Your grades and activities and essay made you a worthy recipient. The foundation has supported dozens of students who went on to successful careers. Connor's phone buzzed. He looked at it and frowned. My mother wants to know when we're coming back. She's planning the engagement party details. Jessica wiped her eyes. Grandpa, please don't ruin this for me. Connor's family is important. This marriage is important. My future depends on it. Your future depends on marrying into wealth? What happened to the girl who wanted to make her own way in the world? That girl grew up, Jessica said quietly. That girl realized that sometimes you have to be practical about your choices. I looked at my granddaughter and saw exactly what I'd been afraid of seeing.
The silence that followed my question was devastating. Jessica looked at Connor, then back at me, then down at her hands. Connor's face had gone from confused to calculating, like he was running numbers on a deal gone bad. Finally, Jessica spoke, her voice barely above a whisper. Grandpa, that's not a fair question. It's the only question that matters. Would you want your poor, embarrassing grandfather at your elegant wedding reception, or would you prefer I stayed away so Connor's important business contacts wouldn't have to see where you came from? Connor stepped forward. Mr. Mitchell, I think you're twisting Jessica's words. Jessica has only ever wanted what's best for everyone involved, including you. What's best for me, or what's best for your family's image? Connor's expression hardened. My family has been nothing but generous. We've welcomed Jessica with open arms. We've made allowances for differences in background and social standing. Allowances? You've made allowances for my granddaughter like she's a charity case you're graciously accepting into your world? That's not what I meant, isn't it? You just said your parents set aside funds to support me because they assumed I was a financial burden. You told Jessica this neighborhood wasn't good enough. Your mother called my side of the family charmingly humble, which is rich person code for too poor to matter. Connor's face flushed red. My family has built something real over 3 generations. We have standards because maintaining excellence requires standards. I've built something real too, Connor. The difference is I built it to help people, not to exclude them. Your family standards seem primarily designed to determine who's worthy of your time and who isn't. That's incredibly unfair. You don't know anything about my family's charitable work. We donate to several organizations every year. How much? Excuse me? How much does your family donate to charity annually? Connor looked uncomfortable. I don't have exact numbers, but it's substantial. I pulled out another document from my folder. This one showing Heartland Community Trust's tax returns for the past 5 years. Last year, my foundation provided $1.2 million in direct housing assistance, emergency grants, and scholarship funding. The year before that, $1.1 million. I've averaged just over $1 million annually in charitable giving for the past decade. Connor stared at the tax returns. That's impossible. You'd have to be generating significant income to give away that much money. Real estate rental income from 43 properties carefully managed and reinvested, plus returns on a conservative investment portfolio that I've built over 45 years of living on $3,400 a month and putting everything else back into the mission. Connor pulled out his phone again and started typing. Jessica watched him, her face a mask of confusion and something that might have been shame. After a minute, Connor looked up. I just searched for Heartland Community Trust. There are articles about your foundation in housing advocacy journals, awards from veteran organizations and homeless services coalitions. The work speaks for itself. I don't need publicity or recognition. I need results. Connor showed Jessica his phone. Babe, your grandfather won the Housing Champion Award from the National Coalition for Homeless Veterans in 2019. There's a photo of him accepting it. Jessica looked at the photo.
at her grandfather, in an ill-fitting suit, receiving an award she'd never heard about. And something broke in her expression. "Why didn't you tell anyone about this?" "Because the work isn't about me. It's about the families we help. The moment I start promoting myself is the moment it becomes about ego instead of impact." Connor was scrolling through more search results. "There's an interview with you from 2021 in Affordable Housing Monthly. You talked about sustainable models for charitable property management. You said, and I quote, 'The biggest threat to affordable housing isn't lack of resources, it's lack of commitment from people who have resources.' You said too many wealthy people treat charity like a tax deduction instead of a calling." Jessica's voice was small. "You were talking about people like Connor's family. I was talking about everyone who has more than they need but chooses comfort over contribution. That includes a lot of people across all income levels." Connor set his phone down. "Mr. Mitchell, I need to be direct with you. This changes things." "What things?" "My parents need to know about this, about your actual financial situation and your foundation work. They've made certain assumptions that need to be corrected. Assumptions you encouraged them to make, because having a poor grandfather-in-law made Jessica seem more impressive by comparison. Look at how far she's come despite her humble origins." Connor's jaw tightened. "That's a cynical interpretation." "Is it? Jessica told me herself that your mother finds my background charmingly humble. She's positioned herself as someone who overcame disadvantages to earn her place in your world. The truth is, she had a fully funded education, a grandfather with significant assets, and opportunities she took for granted because she never asked where they came from." Jessica was crying again. "I didn't know, Grandpa. I swear I didn't know any of this." "You didn't know because you didn't ask. You saw what you wanted to see. Someone who fit the narrative you were building about yourself." Connor's phone buzzed again. He answered it this time, stepping into my kitchen for privacy. I could hear him talking in low, urgent tones, probably explaining to his parents that the family dynamics had just shifted in unexpected ways. Jessica and I sat in silence. Finally, she spoke. "What happens now?" "That depends on what you want to happen." I want to marry Connor. I love him." "Do you love him, or do you love what he represents?" "That's not fair." "Life rarely is, Jessica, but answer the question honestly. If Connor worked at the same tech startup you did, if his parents owned one car dealership instead of 17, if his last name didn't come with country club memberships and business connections, would you still be planning this wedding?" She hesitated again, and that hesitation told me everything. Connor came back from the kitchen, his expression serious. "My parents want to meet with you. Tomorrow, if possible. They have questions about the foundation and your financial situation." "I'm sure they do. Now that I'm not a liability, I've become interesting." "Mr. Mitchell, that's not entirely fair. My parents are sophisticated people. They appreciate success in all its forms. They appreciate success now that they know about it. When they thought I was just a poor old man, I was someone to be managed and hidden away." Connor didn't argue because he couldn't. Jessica stood up, still holding the foundation documents. "Grandpa, I need to process all this. Take all the time you need. But understand something, Jessica. The foundation is my life's work. It will continue after I'm gone, which means the assets I've built over 45 years will keep helping people long after I'm dead." Jessica's face went pale. "What are you saying?" "I'm saying that your assumptions about inheritance need to be corrected the same way Connor's parents' assumptions about my financial situation need to be corrected." Connor caught the implication immediately. "Mr. Mitchell, Jessica mentioned that you'd set up a trust fund for her. She said it was around $4 million. "That's correct. A trust fund was established in 2008 when Jessica was 16. Current value? Approximately $4.2 million. Jessica's relief was visible. "So that's still mine?" "That depends on your definition of yours. The trust was established with the intention of providing for your future if you demonstrated the values I tried to instill. Values like humility, compassion, awareness of privilege, and commitment to helping others.
Connor's expression shifted from relief to concern. What do you mean if she demonstrated those values? I mean, the trust has conditions, Jessica. Conditions you agreed to when you were 18, and the trust transferred from a minor account to an adult conditional trust. You signed documents, you read the terms. Jessica's face went white. I don't remember any conditions. I remember you saying you'd set up money for my future. You remember what you wanted to remember. The actual trust document, which you signed in the presence of an attorney and a notary, specifies that full access to the trust funds is conditional on meeting certain criteria by age 35. Connor's voice got hard. What criteria? Demonstrating sustained commitment to charitable work, community service, or professional work that serves the public good. Jessica had 3 years to establish that she was living according to principles of service rather than self-interest. Jessica was shaking. That's insane. You can't control my life with money. I'm not controlling your life. I'm making sure my life savings go to someone who will use them wisely. If that's you, wonderful. If it's not, the money will go where it can do the most good. Connor pulled out his phone again. This sounds like an illegal restriction on inheritance. My father has attorneys who specialize in trust law. The trust was drafted by one of the top estate attorneys in Ohio and reviewed by 3 separate law firms. It's completely legal. Conditional trusts are common when donors want to ensure their values are honored. Jessica sat down hard on my couch. What happens if I don't meet the conditions? The principal amount returns to Heartland Community Trust and gets distributed according to the foundation's mission. The $4.2 million goes to help families afford housing, veterans transition to civilian life, students attend college, and people facing homelessness get back on their feet. Connor was pacing now. When do the conditions get evaluated?
Connor made the call to his parents right there in my living room, putting them on speaker without asking my permission. Douglas Ashford's voice came through clear and authoritative, the voice of a man accustomed to being obeyed. Connor, your mother and I have been waiting. What's the situation? Dad, it's complicated. Mr. Mitchell isn't exactly what we thought. Maureen's voice joined in, sharp and impatient. What does that mean? Is he being difficult about the assisted living arrangement? Connor looked at me, then at Jessica, then at the phone. He has a charitable foundation worth over $13 million. He's been running it for 45 years. The line went silent for a long moment. Then Douglas spoke. His tone completely changed. I'm sorry, did you say 13 million? Connor nodded even though they couldn't see him. Yes, sir. Property portfolio of 8.3 million, investment accounts of 4.7 million. He owns 43 rental properties and provides affordable housing to over 100 families. Maureen's voice got that careful quality wealthy people use when they've made a social miscalculation. Connor, darling, I think perhaps we should have this conversation in person. We'll be there in 45 minutes. Don't let Mr. Mitchell leave. She hung up before anyone could respond. Jessica looked at me with something like panic. Grandpa, what are you going to tell them? The truth. They've been operating under false assumptions, and those assumptions need to be corrected. Connor was pacing again, running his hand through his perfectly styled hair. This is a disaster. My parents are going to think we intentionally misled them about your family's financial situation. Did you intentionally mislead them? I asked quietly. Connor stopped pacing. We presented information based on what we knew. What you assumed, I corrected. You saw an old man in cheap clothes driving a beat-up car and decided that was the whole story. You never asked questions. You just filled in the narrative that made sense to you. Jessica stood up. Grandpa, please, when Connor's parents get here, can you just be reasonable? Can you help us smooth this over? Smooth what over? The fact that you're embarrassed by me? The fact that you tried to have me institutionalized so I wouldn't be visible at your wedding? The fact that you've spent months positioning yourself as someone who rose above her humble circumstances when you never bothered to understand what those circumstances actually were? Connor's phone buzzed with a text. His face went pale as he read it. My father just texted. He found Heartland Community Trust. He found the Housing Champion Award, the interviews, the advocacy work. He wants to know why we didn't mention any of this before. What did you tell him? Connor's hands were shaking slightly. I told him we're still gathering information. Jessica grabbed Connor's arm. What does that mean for us? It means my parents are going to have a lot of questions about why their future daughter-in-law didn't know about her own grandfather's philanthropic work. It makes you look either incredibly disconnected from your family or deliberately deceptive. Jessica's voice rose. I wasn't being deceptive. I genuinely didn't know. And that, I said quietly, is actually worse. Being deceptive would mean you knew the truth and chose to hide it. Not knowing means you were so uninterested in my life that you never asked basic questions about how I spent my time or what mattered to me. Connor checked his watch. They'll be here in 30 minutes. Mr. Mitchell, I need to know what your intentions are. My intentions? Are you planning to use this situation to humiliate Jessica, to punish her for the assisted living suggestion? I'm not planning to humiliate anyone. I'm planning to have an honest conversation about values, assumptions, and what really matters in life. Connor didn't look reassured. My parents are very influential people. They have connections throughout the automotive industry, real estate development, local politics. They're not accustomed to being put in awkward positions. Then perhaps this will be a learning experience for them. Jessica sat down on my couch and put her head in her hands. This was supposed to be the happiest time of my life, planning a wedding, joining an amazing family, building a future. Instead, everything is falling apart. Nothing is falling apart, Jessica. It's just becoming clear. There's a difference. She looked up at me with red eyes. What's becoming clear? That you've built your future on sand, on appearances and assumptions and other people's money, on a version of yourself that isn't real and a version of me that never existed. Connor's phone buzzed again. They're 15 minutes away. They're bringing their attorney. Of course they are, I said. Wealthy people always bring attorneys when they discover they've miscalculated a social situation. Connor looked offended. My parents are protecting their interests. What interests need protecting? I'm a 72-year-old man who runs a charity housing. I'm not a threat to anyone. You're a threat to the narrative, Connor said, more honestly than he probably intended. My parents built their business on understanding people, reading situations, maintaining control. You've disrupted their understanding of this entire situation. Good. Maybe disruption is what's needed. The doorbell rang exactly 14 minutes later. Douglas and Maureen Ashford didn't believe in being late, even when they were early. Connor opened the door, and I got my first look at Jessica's future in-laws in their natural state, not the carefully composed country club version, but the people who appeared when things didn't go according to plan. Douglas Ashford was 63, silver-haired, wearing a suit that probably cost more than I spent on clothes in a decade. Maureen was 58, perfectly styled, carrying a designer handbag that could have housed a family of 4 in one of my properties for 2 months. Behind them came a younger man, mid-30s, carrying a leather briefcase, the attorney. Mr. Mitchell, Douglas said, extending his hand. I'm Douglas Ashford. This is my wife Maureen and our attorney, Kevin Patterson. I shook his hand. Leonard Mitchell, please, come in. They filed into my small living room, and I watched them take in the modest furniture, the simple decorations, and the complete absence of anything that would signal wealth or status. Maureen's eyes lingered on my worn recliner, the kind you'd buy at a discount furniture store. The attorney, Kevin, was already scanning the room like he was cataloging evidence. Please, sit down. Can I get anyone coffee or water? We're fine, thank you, Douglas said, settling onto my couch. Mr. Mitchell, Connor has shared some surprising information with us about your charitable foundation. Heartland Community Trust, yes. I've been running it since 1979. Douglas leaned forward. 45 years is a substantial commitment. Connor mentioned you've built a portfolio worth over $13 million. That's correct. 43 properties providing affordable housing, plus investment accounts that fund scholarships and emergency assistance. Maureen's voice spoke for the first time, her voice carefully controlled.
Mr. Mitchell, I hope you'll forgive my directness, but this comes as quite a shock. Jessica gave us the impression that you were struggling financially. Jessica gave you the impression she thought was true based on assumptions she made. I never told Jessica I was struggling. She saw how I lived and drew her own conclusions. Kevin, the attorney, pulled out a notepad. Mr. Mitchell, for the record, can you confirm your current living expenses and income? I live on approximately $3,400 per month from Social Security and a pension. My housing, utilities, food, transportation, and other expenses total roughly $2,800 monthly. The remaining $600 goes into a personal savings account for emergencies. And the foundation's assets. Completely separate. The foundation is a registered 501c3 charitable organization with its own board of directors, financial accounts, and operational structure. I draw no salary from the foundation. All donated funds and rental income get reinvested into the mission. Douglas exchanged a glance with Kevin. That's an unusual arrangement. Most foundation directors take at least a modest salary for their work. I don't need a salary. I need purpose. The foundation gives me that. Maureen's expression had shifted from shock to something calculating. Mr. Mitchell, this level of philanthropic commitment is admirable. I have to ask, though, why you've been so secretive about it. I haven't been secretive. The foundation files public tax returns. We're registered with the state. Anyone who asked about my work would have gotten a complete answer. But nobody asked. Jessica never asked. Connor never asked. And based on your comment about me being from a charmingly humble background, I suspect you never asked either. Maureen had the grace to look embarrassed. That comment was meant affectionately. Was it, or was it meant to signal to others that Jessica's family wasn't quite at your social level, which made your acceptance of her all the more generous? Douglas held up a hand. Mr. Mitchell, let's focus on the present situation. Jessica is about to become part of our family. We have certain expectations about transparency and communication within our family structure. The fact that significant assets and charitable work were never disclosed creates complications. What kind of complications? Douglas chose his words carefully. My family has worked very hard to build our reputation. We're associated with certain standards, certain levels of success. When we welcome someone into our family, we do our due diligence. We understand their background, their connections, their financial situation. And you thought you'd done your due diligence on Jessica's family, but it turns out your due diligence was based on appearances rather than facts. Douglas's expression hardened slightly. Mr. Mitchell, I'm trying to be diplomatic here. The reality is that your granddaughter allowed us to believe you needed our financial support. She allowed us to make arrangements for your care. That puts her credibility in question. Jessica started to speak, but I raised my hand. Mr. Ashford, your granddaughter didn't lie to—
Kevin looked impressed, despite himself. Sullivan & Associates is one of the top estate planning firms in the Midwest. If they drafted it, the trust is likely bulletproof. Douglas's expression showed he understood the implications. So Jessica either meets the charitable commitment requirements or the $4 million goes to your foundation. That's correct. The trust board, which consists of 3 independent attorneys and 2 nonprofit directors who have no connection to me or Jessica, will evaluate her record of service over the next 3 years. If she demonstrates sustained commitment to helping others, the trust transfers to her full control at age 35. If not, it funds the foundation's mission. Maureen's voice got sharp. Mr. Mitchell, this feels manipulative. You're essentially forcing Jessica to live according to your values or lose her inheritance. I'm ensuring that my life's work supports people who share my values. If Jessica shares those values, wonderful. If she doesn't, the money goes where it will do the most good. That's not manipulation, that's stewardship. Connor spoke up. What exactly counts as meeting the requirements? What does sustained commitment look like? The trust document specifies that Jessica must demonstrate at least 500 hours of charitable work, community service, or professional work serving disadvantaged populations over the 3-year evaluation period. That averages to about 3 hours per week. She must also make regular financial contributions to charitable causes proportional to her income. The board evaluates whether these actions represent genuine commitment or last-minute compliance. Jessica's voice was barely audible. 3 hours a week for 3 years? It's less time than you spend on Instagram, I said quietly. Less time than you spend planning your wedding. Less time than you spend at the country club. But it's time spent thinking about someone other than yourself, which apparently feels like an unreasonable burden. Douglas stood up and walked to my window, looking out at the neighborhood his wife had called declining. Mr. Mitchell, let me be frank. My family has built our success on understanding value, on making smart investments, on recognizing opportunities. What you've built with your foundation is genuinely impressive, but this situation puts us in a difficult position. What position is that? Douglas turned to face me. Jessica is about to marry into our family. Our business partners, our social circle, our professional network, they all expect certain things from an Ashford family member. If Jessica spends the next 3 years working at homeless shelters and food banks to secure her inheritance, it sends a message that we couldn't provide for her, that she needs that money. Maureen nodded. Douglas is right. It looks like Jessica is fortune hunting her own grandfather's charity money while married to Connor. Or, I said, it looks like Jessica is a person of substance who contributes to her community regardless of her husband's wealth. But I suppose that depends on whether you see charitable work as something poor people do or something good people do. The room went silent. Kevin, the attorney, closed his notebook. Mr. Mitchell, I think you've made your position clear. The trust terms are legal and enforceable. The question now is whether this family can move forward productively. Douglas sat back down. Mr. Mitchell, what would productive look like to you? It would look like Jessica making her own choice about what kind of person she wants to be. Not because she needs the money, not because she's afraid of losing the money, but because she genuinely wants to contribute something meaningful to the world. If she makes that choice, the trust is just a bonus. If she doesn't, the money goes where it was always meant to go, to people who need help. Maureen's voice got cold. And what about the wedding? What about our family's reputation? What happens when people find out about this situation? That depends on what you tell them. You could tell them Jessica's grandfather is a vindictive old man holding money over her head, or you could tell them Jessica's grandfather built a $13 million charitable foundation and invited his granddaughter to be part of that legacy. The story you tell says more about your values than mine. Connor looked at Jessica. Babe, we need to talk, privately. They stepped outside onto my small porch. Through the window, I could see them having an intense conversation, Connor gesturing emphatically while Jessica cried. Douglas and Maureen sat in uncomfortable silence, occasionally whispering to each other or consulting with Kevin. After 10 minutes, Connor and Jessica came back inside. Jessica's eyes were red, but her voice was steady. Grandpa, I need to say something. I'm listening. I've been a terrible granddaughter. I made assumptions about you because it was easier than actually knowing you. I positioned myself as someone who overcame disadvantages when really I just took advantages for granted. I tried to hide you away because I was ashamed of things that should have made me proud. She took a shaky breath. Connor and I talked. We're going to postpone the wedding. Maureen stood up quickly. Jessica, that's not necessary. Surely we can work through this. Jessica shook her head. Mrs. Ashford, with respect, I need to work through this myself first. I need to figure out who I am when I'm not trying to impress anyone or live up to anyone's image. I need to understand what my grandfather has been trying to teach me my whole life. Connor took her hand. We're not breaking up. We're just taking time to make sure we're building our future on the right foundation. Douglas looked at his son with something like respect. That's mature, Connor. Maureen didn't look pleased, but she nodded slowly. Kevin, the attorney, packed up his briefcase. Mr. Mitchell, I think we're done here. For what it's worth, your trust structure is one of the most thoughtfully designed conditional trusts I've seen. Thank you. I had good attorneys and 45 years to think about what mattered. After they left, Jessica sat down next to me on the couch. Grandpa, I don't know how to fix this. You don't fix it overnight. You fix it day by day, hour by hour, choice by choice. Where do I start? You start by asking questions instead of making assumptions. You start by finding work that helps people instead of just promoting yourself. You start by measuring your worth in what you contribute rather than what you consume. Jessica leaned her head on my shoulder like she used to when she was little. I'm scared I'll fail. I'm scared the trust board will decide I'm not worthy. The trust board doesn't matter, Jessica. What matters is whether you decide you're worthy.
Whether you become someone who helps because it's right, not because there's money attached. If you do that, the trust is just a tool to help you do more good. If you don't, you never deserved it anyway. We sat in silence for a long time, watching the sun set through my modest living room window. Finally, Jessica spoke. "Can I start tomorrow? There's a food bank 2 miles from here. They need volunteers." That's a good start. But Jessica, one shift at a food bank won't undo months of choosing image over substance. This has to become who you are, not something you do to check boxes. I know. I think I'm starting to understand that. She stood up. "I should go. I have a lot to think about. And Grandpa?" "Yes?" "Thank you for not giving up on me, even when I gave up on myself." "I haven't given up on you, Jessica. I've just stopped enabling you. There's a difference." 6 months later, Jessica showed up at my door on a Saturday morning wearing jeans and a t-shirt I'd never seen before. Her hair was in a simple ponytail, no professional styling. She looked tired, but genuinely happy. "Grandpa, can I tell you about my week?" "Of course." "I volunteered 18 hours at the family shelter downtown. I helped 3 families fill out housing assistance applications. One of them got approved yesterday, and the mom cried and hugged me." Jessica's eyes were bright. I've never felt anything like that. Like I actually mattered to someone's life in a real way. That's the feeling I've been chasing for 45 years. She smiled. "I get it now. Why you live the way you do, why the foundation matters more than fancy cars or big houses. Because this feeling is worth more than anything money can buy." We sat on my porch, and Jessica told me about the family she was helping, the work she was learning to do, the person she was learning to become. The trust board evaluation was still 2.5 years away, but it didn't matter anymore. My granddaughter had found something more valuable than $4 million. She'd found purpose. And whether the money eventually came to her or went to the foundation, either way, it would be used to help people who needed it. That's all I had ever wanted. Sometimes teaching someone the value of giving means being willing to take everything away. Not as punishment, but as clarity. Jessica had to lose her assumptions about inheritance to gain understanding about legacy. And in the end, that understanding was the real inheritance, worth much more than any trust fund could ever be.
Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.